Sorry, reply, guys. I didn't mean to be so curt. It's been a long day. I apologize to you all. Welcome to Crash, the technology podcast about everything else. Today, everyone seems to be having a South by Southwest. Everyone seems to be having an IPO. And everyone seems to be pinning their hopes on XR. I'm Alex Hudson.
And I'm Chris Stokel-Walker. How has
the famous Chris Stokel-Walker.
We should explain, we've just come back from a South by Southwest London. It's always important to put the London thing in there. Media mixer.
As we've been told by numerous PRs, they do not call it South by Southwest.
It's affiliated, but not necessarily the same. And you were astounded by the number of people who came up to me, apparently.
Not astounded. We went to sort of this press mixer because, of course, we're media showbiz. And Chris, within 2 minutes, like, oh, no, I don't know anybody. I don't know. Nobody's here. I don't even recognize these faces. Within 5 minutes, I think it was 3 groups of people, I think, and came up to me, oh, my God, it's Chris. And also, in addition to that, I think it was 2, maybe 3, 2 separate people on the street stopped him. So separately, I'd seen Prince William on the street. He was getting out of a car. He was going to the Diana Awards event. And the crowds weren't quite as big.
Not quite. But no. Oh, for Chris.
Genuinely.
Not quite as big for Chris. I thought you were going to say
not quite
for
as big
William.
for you, but nearly. And it was almost people stopping and asking you for selfies, which was slightly terrifying. How does it feel to be that level of famous? You were in your element and there were people literally surrounding you.
No, I was not in my element because I'm socially awkward, so it was not nice at all. I mean, in my defence, I don't come down to London a lot, and it's not as if the people who came up to me, with the exception of one person who is someone that I went to school with, Ben Dalton, who is a journalist with Screen International, with the exception of Ben, effectively, all those people were there to say, hello, we'd love to either have your coverage for our clients, or they were, in one instance, and this is really good PR, I actually think, well done to the PR company in question here, got their client a photo of me and then said, you need to make a beeline for them if you see them. So yeah, it was interesting and weird.
Yeah, that person promised you flowers or something. He was lovely, but if he is listening now, as I hope he is, he said a lot of cancelable things that were luckily off the record, but lovely.
he did say what happened to the UK in the sense of, you're being so tiptoey now about this sort of stuff. So he wouldn't necessarily mind if we said the cancelable things, but regardless, yeah, it was an interesting experience and reminds me the value of absence makes the heart grow fonder, of not being based in London, which is quite nice.
I think we're going to get into South by proper in a second, but it feels like, it felt. Also, it's lovely to hang out with you in person. So we're recording this. If you happen to be watching, you will see that I'm in the very similar background. And Chris is in his hotel room in Shoreditch because South by, this is our fault, not South by's fault. We were going to record it in person in the little podcast studio, and unsurprisingly, it's booked up. And then we're like, oh, we can do it at this mixer without thinking logically about how you actually record a podcast. And then we're like, shall we just go back and do it as if we were doing it normally, even though we spent the last half day together swanning about, particularly and then we need to do a little bit of shout out to Chris, who did a little fireside chat. Well, little fireside chat. It was a massive room with loads of people there, with the Sony guy, and it was really compelling. What's the left? I'm bigging you up.
The lots of people there is the funny thing.
There were more people there than there were for other sessions.
That's true. That is true. South by Southwest, big venues. I'd be interested when we get on to talk about this, the extent to which this is usual or not. I mean, there's a lot of counter-programming, and to be fair, Wes Streeting overlapped with us. So I'm not surprised that there wasn't a room full of people. But yeah, it's interesting. Sorry, you were saying?
I had a lovely time. I think it was really interesting. I also think, I don't know why they've got such big rooms. We instead of just doing a long intro, we should probably just go into South by, because that's what we're going to talk about anyway. So the second South by Southwest, London. Very important that you say London is underway. We've both been there. I've spent yesterday evening and today there. Chris, because the man is so in demand, It's like rocketing down, rocketing up. He came down last night, going up this morning. So we are there. We're doing it, recovering it. We understand that there is some boycott and some controversy. We're doing it. So we're back at our respective spaces. But last year, attendees talked about it not being really energized, and City M accused it of lacking sharpness, instead focusing on safe speakers and LinkedIn sound bites, and labelled it vibeless. Whereas this year, big names like ex-Chancellor George Osborne, London Mayor Sadiq Khan, former First Lady Michelle Obama, West Streeting, as we previously mentioned, and media entrepreneurs, Anton Deck. They're all in attendance. And I discussed, I saw Prince William without realising, and then there was a crowd, and there was a more crowd. And South by London has been a moment. So it's a literal thunderstorm, so everyone is very wet. There was a metaphorical thunderstorm, so the advertised US speakers, Cenk Uygur and Hassan Piker, both were refused UK entry, with South by Southwest standing accused of not really mounting a robust defence by people like journalist Ash Sarkar, who has boycotted since. So that added to a tube strike across Tuesday and Thursday some of the week. It's been an uphill battle, and as we talked about in the intro, like some of the sessions really have been full, but a lot of them have been sparsely attended. But we're here. I'm exhausted from speaking to strangers. I live like up the road, so it's not a real big commute for me. But Chris is the most famous man in Shoreditch, so he's the real one to speak on this. Chris, is South by Southwest good?
I don't think that it's bad, but I also, in my mind, this had become this mythical thing, right? And I'm very grateful. So, full disclosure, South by Southwest have paid for this hotel room. They brought me down to London. I didn't get paid to do the chairing of the fireside chat, but I live in Newcastle. I basically said, why would I come down for this and lose money if you're unable to cover the cost of travel and things like that? So I come from a biased place here. For me, South by Southwest, and it's interesting, I have an editor for Fast Company, Max Offberg, who lives in Austin, who regularly chairs a lot of the stuff at South by Southwest, who talks about it as being this really interesting, really vibrant event. I had expected that there would be more of that. I was surprised at how empty things felt. And I think that might have been because, truthfully, I'm swept in and I'm swooping out. I've only been here, less than actually literally less than 12 hours in London. So my experience of this is limited. I think it's really, really interesting, and I can kind of see the germ of what they're going for. I'm not entirely certain that it is at that stage, as you might expect, of being the equivalent of the Austin one, because the Austin one to me has a kind of mythical image in my mind of this kind of brilliant creative space that brings together all of these disparate people, all of these disparate areas. People who I spoke to have said this was way better than last year, and I think that's really great. I'd be very excited to see what it's like next year. And truthfully, I would probably spend more time here next year, because I think that I'm probably not representative. But you have an interesting point of view, Alex, as someone who has been to the OG, as someone who has spent a lot of time here, and also as someone who can compare those two.
So I think South by Southwest London's biggest issue is being called South by Southwest. If it was just a tech conference that was happening in London, of this scale, with the guest list, so Michelle Obama, Sadiq Khan, West Streeting, with so many bigwigs from all of Blue. There was like the Blue Sky COO or CMO around yesterday. Like, these are huge gets for what is a conference in year two. That is a huge, big deal. The infrastructure setup is huge. The branding is huge. All of that sort of stuff. I've spent years covering South by Southwest in Austin, and that takes over Austin. The whole city is taken over. The conference center is just one tiny part of it, but there's music venues. There are massive music venues. There is a whole infrastructure built out of this place, whereby one part of it is the tech conference, one part of it is the media conference, one part of it is the music conference. There are so many different vibes to this that all happen at once, and it's this absolute smush of the best people in the world coming together. And also, it's sunny. There's infinite counterculture events and sort of alternate events that are happening at the same time. So you walk from bar to bar within 2 minutes of each other. And some of my favorite bands that I've just discovered by wandering into a bar at 3 p.m. when I've got half an hour between these sessions. And it is unbelievable. Like, in all of the ways that City AM has called South by London vibeless, again, I haven't been back to South by since COVID, and from what I hear from friends, again, friends who I've made at South by Southwest, like lifelong friends that I've made in that event because it was such a vibey place, have said that it's less populated, it's less busy. There is less stuff going on now than there was, and partly because there's been a huge takeover. It's now owned through by different people, and it's a more venture capital based system. But the vibe of London, you're still having to walk 15, 20 minutes between venues. There are still coffee shops literally next to the venue that have no branding and no sort of discounts. There's still, you're walking into a very sterile event space and you're confronted by very sterile people and you're having very safe conversations about very safe things. So without, I don't want to bash South by Southwest. I think it's an important part of the conference. But if you have a 4-person panel where it is the producer of a program talking to the 2 presenters of the program, interviewing them, and then interviewing the exec producer of that same program, and that is your whole panel, you have made some very safe choices to get some famous names through the door, rather than having an interesting discussion about the mechanics of what has made that show the powerhouse that it is, and what is the people are there to find out industry knowledge and to have a really interesting conversation about the mechanics of what comes next, not to find out how a celebrity has a lovely time with all the producers of that show.
Yeah, and I think that what you said at the start is a really interesting thing. This was a fascinating conference. It's kind of not cursed by its name, but it comes with that baggage and that expectation, which is always going to be difficult to live up to, not least because it's a different city, it's a different culture, it's a different kind of area. Ant and Dec are not as interesting as the indie band that you find at 3 p.m. On random sort of...
How dare you? But also, I mean, they've got one of my favorite bands are called Robo Cobra Quartet. Highly recommend checking them out, even with the stupid name. But yeah, they just walked into there like, what is this? This is magical, and that doesn't exist. Like I was at a classical PRS event, which is like Performing Rights Society, which is the sort of music industries, everyone gets paid body, and they were putting on a lovely event in the basement in the Shoreditch Town Hall, and it was about this sort of what comes next with classical, and so the music there was unbelievably beautiful, and that little smush felt like South by of Austin. And there's an event tonight that I can't go to because I'm busy making and producing this podcast by Mahogany, who've done stuff. They're a record label they work a lot with Laura Marlin. They've worked a lot with Mumford & Sons, those types of musicians. And they're putting on an event that sounds similarly interesting, but still it's the cart before the horse. They are Uber branding. They have all of this big sponsorship from big brands without getting the whole Austin ethos of keep Austin weird. And the huge part of that was it took them 20 years of just weirdos and brilliant musical minds, and then tech took it over, and all the brilliant entrepreneurs who weren't about money, they're about making something brilliant and changing the world.
I don't know. I think probably we just haven't searched hard enough for it, but that is an indication in of itself that if it's harder to find, then it is a slightly different conference. I mean, yeah, my experience walking into a Waymo lounge, being told by the person who scanned your QR code, the activation is here for you to walk through, felt a little bit too much like I was at Random Big Tech Conference number 72. But I think perhaps there is a risk here of us trying to oversell what this is at the minute. You know, this is year 2 of a conference, an event. I don't even know if they want to call it a conference, to be perfectly honest. Might be that they want to call it a festival, might be that they want to call it something else. And so, you know, I could not do this in year 2 by any stretch of the imagination. Like, I think that the sort of cultural impact that it has, the idea that you have Wes Streeting, you have Michelle Obama, you have all of these things that have become newsworthy happening at your event, even though you are only in your 2nd year of operation, is really significant. And so, like, I'm wary of us being too negative, because I'm conscious that this is very much still in its early days, and probably itself trying to figure out what it needs to be in its identity.
I was chatting to a former colleague entirely off the record, so I won't mention who they are, but they were sort of saying they can't believe it's come back for a 2nd year. And given that South by Southwest has agreed a 10-year licensing agreement with London, it is very likely that it stays 10 years. But I've yet to hear someone be confident and sure that it has 10 years of work in it. London comes with its own challenges. So today, for the first time in a long time, I had my wash bag searched coming into your talk, actually.
They were worried
So,
what you would do with it to me. Storming the stage to spray him with toothpaste.
carting around my massive bag, which I didn't do any filming with or any recording. It was carting around a full kit bag, but like I'd come straight from the gym, so I had my wash bag in it, and he went through my wash bag. I was like, "Hey, friend, what are you looking for? Glass objects? Like why?" Point one. Secondly, fastidious. Like you have my name, you've already scanned my QR code. You know exactly who I am. So if I do anything, you know exactly where to find me. My address is on record. So I think that is a particularly London problem. So we've talked about this before, but when you get into the clubs and you get into the bars, people will super search you for anything because that's the way that London has gone. It felt a little bit stupid. No, it felt not a little bit. It felt entirely stupid to have that level of fastidiousness when you're holding your name and your photo is around your neck. I think some of the presentations were built for a mainstream audience when South by has to be a specialist audience. So a person spending 10 minutes explaining what qubits is in a presentation about qubits feels, I mean, it's not where the crash audience exists, obviously, but it feels a little bit like you're having a mainstream conversation for a specialist audience. So I think that's where that programming becomes a little bit mixed. So there was some really fascinating stuff like Neil Patel, who runs MP Digital, which stands for Neil Patel Digital, and he was talking about the way that the site journey is really going to change. And that was a really compelling piece of 30 minutes piece of really information that all of the industry can take away and learn from, or at least be inspired by, and it made you fizzy. And hopefully we're going to get him on the program in the next couple of weeks, hopefully. And so there is really interesting stuff there, but I still don't know what it's for. And I still think, given some of the attendances, I don't know who's buying those passes. And I am compelled, because it's second year and it's huge disservice as it should be fixed. I've talked to the organisers. They say, like, we're in year 2, like, give us a bit of slack, and that's fair enough. I want to feel vibey when I'm in South by, because I have never been more excited than in Austin, when the entire buzz around it just makes you just feel like almost literally vibrates your entire being and makes you excited about everything going on. This feels like a tech conference.
But and this is the challenge, right? Because as you say, there's a 10-year contract in place there. There is this idea that this will be coming around again next year, and I would look forward to that. I think it'll be interesting. Perhaps this is the question to which there is no answer, and I'm asking it a bit early, but you've kind of captured several things there. Okay, you don't want checks on your wash bag, very specific. You want more Neil Patel, very specific. You want more vibiness, which is quite vague. So what could they do to try and capture that spirit, do you think?
There is an answer to that. So you decorporate it. You look for you actively pursue innovators in this space. You actively pursue the interesting musicians and not just ones that are on big labels. You actively pursue the people, even before angel investors, the people who are just having interesting ideas. The academics. I have seen an absolute vacuum of, with present company excluded, of course, but the absolute vacuum of academics and the thinkers. And it is the business leaders rather than the academics that are leading that space. So bring more of them in. Have more of those difficult discussions on those round tables. Make it fun and compelling and interesting, and also invite more of the venues that aren't necessarily affiliated with South by, and then South by in Austin has a love-hate relationship with the sort of alternate South by Southwest, but without those events that aren't officially sanctioned, that you don't have to be so brand safe with for your marketing reasons, it means that there is that absolute compelling story of something happening and something changing and the world being at your fingertips. Without that, you're left in here is another event, here is another talk, here is another thing. And you're getting the people who are looking for exciting people rather than getting the exciting people themselves.
I still would like to come back. I think it'll be interesting to see how it's different next year, because
I would also love to come back. It's down the road, and also it's South by Southwest, and I'm an absolute South by Southwest fanboy, irrespective of where it is.
interesting.
The one the one thing I'm going to pick out of Sabbath. So all of this stuff saying is like there is not really that much stuff to talk. I think the one thing that I have taken as a theme is XR. So the principle that the metaverse is dead, long live the extended verse. So XR is extended reality. So outside of the near infinite AI and LLM chat, and I've had an argument with someone earlier about like AI companies, please stop. Just so oversaturated. If every company is an AI company, aren't they just companies now? But of course, that is the big story, but everyone's had that all before. It's repetitive, it's boring. But this XR thing, that is that new emerging world of what that becomes. So no one wholly agrees exactly what XR is or isn't, or exactly where it begins and ends, but it's VR, AR, MR, so mixed reality, spatial computing, and HUD, so heads-up display all in one. And some people include the AI glasses. It's debatable. and sort of the fully AI generated worlds. Some include, but it's murky. But there's three big parts. There's the cultural XR, so that's festivals, institutions, enterprise XR for training design, and actually some people believe that that really is the thing that gets into medicine, and then the sort of display glasses side of it for the entertainment and the AI glasses as it comes. According to analysts Market and Market, the XR market is going to reach $85 billion by 2029, and it's currently around 24, 25 billion now. The reason that we have XR is Mark Zuckerberg and the metaverse's fault, because that is a PR disaster that no one is coming back from. And so this VR thing, which is a neatly captured thing over here, is just poisoned by the Zuckerberg disaster that changed Meta's name and cost them literally billions. So, Chris, have you come across this throughout your South by your 12 hours in London, your South by, and is it a buzzy new term, or actually is this the pragmatic group noun for what this is going to become?
I walked past the Snapchat booth in the in the Truman Brewery or whatever it was, which is probably the closest that you get to XR, with their failed Snap spectacles a while back.
Well,
And
they were funny looking. They were cool.
yeah, I mean, they were. The problem that I have is my life has been chaotic the last few weeks, and so I've been traveling here, there, and everywhere. And I got really discomforted traveling back on a plane from Prague 2 weeks ago, when two people in a row got on the plane with the Meta Ray-Ban glasses, and one of them sat next to me, and I immediately felt on edge in case this thing started recording. So, like, the idea of, like, XR, I think, is interesting, but I do worry about the consequences of this. I was at I was at MWC, Mobile World Congress, in March. What is time now? In Barcelona, and there was a really interesting conversation I had with an analyst who said that this is going to be the next big thing in terms of, like, great that everybody's talking about XR, and great that it's going to offer this opportunity, but we're also going to have to try and figure out the cultural and societal boundaries around this sort of stuff, because fine if you want to be recording stuff on your glasses, your smart glasses, all right, that's okay, but what if it infringes on my rights? Similarly, fine if you want to have some sort of, Pokemon Go style game where everybody that you see can be kind of captured and traded in for points, or whatever you think an XR feature is going to look like. But also, do I want to be part of that as someone who doesn't have those glasses? I'm not so certain about that.
And this is where the problem with XR comes. So I think extended reality is a good term. It's really exciting. It's very fascinating. I think, and the mixed media reality that we're all moving towards will get there. Again, it will be contact lenses. It won't be glasses, because for the exact reason that you can spot it. And so the privacy laws need tightening. That needs work doing now. But on XR more broadly, I was talking to, because of course I was talking to a harpist at this musical event. So like an immersive harpist that was working with an XR specialist around mixed reality projections, and how they were coding that in to create sort of immersive experiences of this harpist performance. It was really, really compelling. And so, because that we know that is coming, so that the idea that digital and real life are already, we're not quite there, but there will be that merging of things where everything gets a little bit smushed. And and my big bit for the metaverse is that Grand Theft Auto 6 will be the biggest component of metaverse, and GTA 5 is like that is already but metaverse. If we're not going to say that GTA 6 is extended reality, but a lot of people will be living most of their lives within GTA 6, or most of their free time within GTA 6. So what does that mean? And at the minute, it feels a bit gimmicky. Like you're going to go to a gig, and you're not going to put on your headset because no one's bought a headset, as Apple found out, as Meta have found out, as everybody's found out. But you walk outside in Shoreditch, and there's a massive Meta Ray-Ban sign. Like, do you know off the top of your head what those sales figures are like for those sunglasses? If you're seeing two people on a flight, that feels quite big.
Well, but it was two people on a flight coming from a global security conference. So, like, they're self-selecting, I would suggest. I mean, I know, I believe that the sales figures have actually been relatively disappointing, in the sense of, I think there is still inventory being left on the shelves.
There you
Let
go.
me
I'm
see.
googling quicker than you. 7 million units sold recently, according to Meta.com's releases in the globally. So again, like we know that eventually something will come along in the space and change it. So the most interesting presentations and the stuff in South by was around XR and what's possible. It's just when does it? And maybe this is a question to which there is no answer. But when does that stop becoming a gimmick and start having practical utilization? Is that in the medical space, and is that in the operation space, or is there something more fundamental about the way people want to record their lives without having to get out their phone and record things?
Yeah, I mean, I would like that world, to be honest. I would like the world in which we have uh, a bit of not always being surveilled.
And I appreciate we're taking quite a narrow view of what XR is, and we're kind of drilling down into what those those glasses are. If we are already in surveillance state, does this not just move it from the national or international body into the individual, and is that better or worse? Or am I trying to do a philosophical point about essentially people want to record some weird shit?
I think it's a philosophical point, to be honest. I personally don't see any benefits or drawbacks to either way. Both are concerning and something that I'm not super keen on. But again, I'm the sort of person that gets a bit awkward when 5 people surround me at a media mixer. So the idea that I would then be kind of
It
on
was more than
camera,
5 people. To be clear, listeners, it was basically the entire mixer was just
it was
swarming.
not. It was
I
not.
heard that one person actually flew over from Sweden specifically to give you flowers. And that's literally what he said. So,
Do you know, by the way, why Prince William was around that sort of space?
yeah, Diana Awards. We already said that. You just
No,
weren't listening.
but he was also pulling a pint in the Prince of Peckham to support his pubs, apparently.
Is the Prince of Peckham in Peckham?
I think it must be because I'm weirdly, I'm also scrolling through X and this just got served to me on my feed from 6 hours ago. He pulled
Well,
a pint alongside Clem Ogbonya, who is the owner of the pub.
what's the opposite of being London centric? It obviously shows your lack of London bias. No, thinking that Shoreditch is anywhere near Peckham. That is a million miles away. It's south of the river. It's a whole different continent.
Don't go south of the river. This is the thing that I know from London taxi drivers in modern media, not any London taxi drivers that I actually know or interact with.
To be clear, South London is a lovely place. It's just transport links are a bit shit. We're already so tired because we've already spent 12 hours of the day with strangers and it is exhausting. So we will take a break, and when we come back, we'll be on really solid ground away from South by Southwest by the fact that everything is having an IPO. See you in 1 second. Welcome back to part 2 of Crashed, where I haven't written a script. So we're going to go fly by night and hope that I know something, and or Chris, who is right about everything. So we're going to use a section to talk about the fact that everything, almost literally everything, not literally everything, is having an IPO. All of the big private AI firms are looking to move into public ownership. So SpaceX, Anthropic, OpenAI. So it is said this will be the first $1 trillion IPO, and it could become AI's defining moment and or the oncoming economic apocalypse, which we're going to cover in future episodes. Given that we started the year with the predictions episode, and I was absolutely certain, as is on record somewhere, that they're not going to IPO this year because it's too risky and they've already got enough venture capital in there and there's already enough private capital. Somebody who I know quite well said almost without even a pause for a second that there was definitely going to be an IPO, and it would likely be that SpaceX or Anthropic would do it first. Chris is again right about everything. Very annoying. But Chris, what is going on, and is this a positive for the market, or is this going to end up being an absolute boom bust? I will only accept polarized binary answers on that. You can't have any nuance.
It's going to stretch the market, I think, to its limits. And whether or not we get a bust, I think, depends on how real or not AI is in terms of its impact on our lives and our society. I happen to think that actually, and I think we've talked before on past podcasts, and I can't truthfully remember whether or not I said that we would have some sort of like bursting of the bubble eventually. At the minute, it kind of feels like we're not going to, or at least I hope not, because the consequences would be catastrophic. But if it's ever going to happen, it's going to be the consequence of these two soon to be 3 IPOs lining up, just like buses do. So, SpaceX, we know now targeting $135 a share. That is unusual, both in the sense of generally the company would go out to investors and say, well, what will you offer us? And then the market kind of settles that agreement. Elon Musk obviously doesn't do these sorts of things like that. He says, no, I'm going to have it $135 a share. That would be what, 75, 80 billion or so. That is a very massive number. You then have OpenAI, which is, the reporting suggests soon to confidentially file for an IPO. Got their party spoiled by Anthropic, who came out this week and said, yeah, no, we're IPOing. We've filed for this. So just to put the numbers in there, 75 billion, big number, very big number for SpaceX. Previously, the biggest debut on the US stock market was Alibaba. That was $22 billion just over a decade ago. The world's biggest IPO was on the Saudi stock market by Saudi Aramco 7 years ago, both outstripped by this SpaceX one. The valuation that Elon Musk is going for is kind of just ridiculous. We talked about that $1 trillion valuation. Anthropic also looking kind of in that ballpark. OpenAI also kind of looking in that ballpark. It kind of begs the question, I suppose, of the extent to which the market can sustain this. So if they do, then it kind of blows everything else out of the water, to be honest. So there's some research by JP Morgan that I looked at which suggested that $410 billion in passive buying by including these IPOs just in the stock market. So pension funds or whatever, not necessarily going out and saying I want SpaceX stock or I want Anthropic stock, but just by dint of the fact that they are investing in the stock market, suggests that there's going to be a huge amount of money going into this sort of stuff. And when you look at the fact that the stock market is so over-concentrated on this handful of firms, so if 10 firms in and around the tech sector currently control more than 40% of the value of the entire S&P 500, if you add SpaceX, OpenAI, and Anthropic, you get pretty much close to 50% there. Already, we are...
That feels quite low. I thought it was even more concentrated.
It's the... You'd probably think about market cap of the Mag 7. This is
what I am thinking of.
Yeah, which is also very, very concentrated. But if we look at the kind of the previous sort of highs of the concentration here in terms of the value, we're higher than we were just before the dot-com bust. We're higher than we were in the last previous concentration peak was 1932, which was as basically there was no liquidity in the stock market after the 1929 financial crisis. What is interesting is that short-term gains here could impact on long-term gains. Let's be clear, right? I know that you think that I know everything. I wrote a story about this for the Evening Standard, the Standard, which will be coming out shortly.
I don't think you know everything. It's just a playful, on-running joke that every time I think I catch you out, you just go, bang, I worked there for 3 years. Bang, I did this. And it is one of the many reasons why I adore hanging out with you, because you are so knowledgeable about so many things, of course. And it's also funny because it just niggles at you. There's something in the back of your little back of your that niggles at it, and therefore it's both funny because it's true enough to niggle at you, and it's also funny as a non-running joke whenever you prove me wrong, or whenever there's that bit of how the fuck did you know that? So it works on so many levels. Not in that actually I think you know everything, only that it's funny and it keeps happening.
It niggles at me because I worry that people think that I actually think I know everything, and then that makes me seem like a massive dickhead, which I really, really do not know everything. I'm waiting to be caught out these days.
To be clear, Chris is very lovely and very humble, and he doesn't like being approached by that many strangers calling him a celebrity in a fancy bar on a rooftop offering free drinks. But again, because it niggles, that makes it funnier. Sorry, we
Indeed.
got off topic. What were we
Yeah,
talking
so
about?
we were talking. So in the spirit of that, like I wrote about this 2 weeks ago. I drafted a story 2 weeks ago about this for the standards, which will be coming out, I presume, in the next week or two. I might have to update it, but I've looked into this in a bit of depth, and actually, there's a market analyst called GMO, which looked at how actually the short-term gain that we could get from these massive flotations could result in long-term pain. So a 1% increase in the stock market's total market capitalization actually has a negative effect historically. So big companies IPO, stock market capitalization increases. Traditionally, throughout history, what then happens is in the next 12 months, there is a 7.5% decrease across the whole stock market. So big thing goes up, market settles down, and actually it settles down lower than you would think. Based on the valuation of these three companies, they would add, if based on what they're looking for, 5% to the total capitalization of the stock market. So multiply that 7.5 by 5% if historical precedent is to happen. And that is why I think this is the biggest test of AI. Because either we get through this and it's totally fine, or Ed Zitron is correct, and actually this is a big bubble, and this is the moment where it sort of pops at a massive scale.
So I'm going to give my viewers. I'm going to play in a little clip from Cory Doctorow, being the clever broadcaster that he is, made some beautifully, succinctly made those arguments.
I think AI is the money-losingest thing the human race has ever done. I think it's grossly oversold. And I think that the capital markets have lost their minds because of the confluence of large tech monopolies that have saturated their markets and need to convince investors that they can keep growing despite the fact that they have 90% market shares, and the fact that they have a large customer base of bosses who are just infinitely excited at the prospect of firing mouthy workers who know how to do things that they don't know how to do and replacing them with software that compliantly does whatever it's told.
So, Chris, money losingist, and it's all sort of confidence trickster. And I appreciate that Cory is a very clever and very capable broadcaster, so he's picking his words very carefully, partly for effect and partly because he really believes it. But I think the .ai crash is something that we were going to cover on Crash in fully in depth, but just as a sort of brief moment, to your point, that even the numbers you talk about are going to decimate the market, and if there isn't substance to what the AI revolution is going to promise us in the short term, how much is it doom mongering, and how much is that a likely or probable eventuality of these IPOs coming so quickly after one another?
I think that the IPOs coming so quickly one after another is a big issue. I think that, and Cory Doctorow is incredibly interesting, and everything that he does is really fascinating. I think you're ignorant if you don't think that AI has an impact on our lives now. Like, it's not a parlor trick. It's just not. Right? Like, if you can't, at this stage, with the arrival of agentic AI, with the ability to put a local LLM on your laptop, I didn't find any RAM, by the way, in Vilnius. It was far too expensive in comparison to the UK. I found a workaround, which was I had an old laptop and I took out. See, this is why you listen to Crash the Tech podcast about everything else, because also you have a co-host who literally like unscrews the bottom of his laptops and takes out the RAM from his old laptops, put it into his new laptop in order to eke out a little bit of extra stuff. I think
Post
if
the
you
person
are,
of the reply, guys, we all secretly have inside
yeah,
all of us.
Whenever I get a screwdriver in my hand and open up a laptop, it's very interesting.
You're just desperate to comment on somebody's physical appearance.
Yeah. If you
reply, guys. I didn't mean to be so curt.
It's cold and calculated.
It's been a long day. I apologize to you all. Sorry.
If you cannot find a benefit for AI in a world where we have agentic AI, we have frontier models that have advanced so much, we have the ability for them to actually go out into the world and do stuff, you're either stupid and don't understand how to use it, or you're willfully denying yourself the access to it. I get where people are uncomfortable with AI. I get that people might want to opt out of it And those are both very, very valid viewpoints. I'm not an AI boomer by any stretch of the imagination. I think there's a lot of issues with it. But I think that the idea that this is all a sham could have been true in November 2022. If you're still saying it in June 2026, you have either not been paying attention or you are willfully trying to create something into existence that has not been true for about 2 years.
So I wholeheartedly agree with you on all of those points and saying, of course, AI is here to stay. How we move past the idea of the age of the website, how we move past all of these things that we've taken for granted and assume will always be true. AI is already questioning that very fabric of the way that we use the internet, the way that we find out information, the way that we put all of these things. Absolutely agree with you. The difficulty comes with what does that mean for market capitalization? So if we take that somehow big tech will continue to control the levers and continue to control the mechanisms of AI and LLMs and whatever they become, fine, you can see how the trillion-dollar valuation happens. You can see how that maybe there is a slight recalculation and a little bit of an adjustment, but you don't see it just crater the global economy. But the counter argument is that if you can make 80% of Anthropic with a Chinese ripoff that comes at 10% of the price, less than 10% of the price, and if you view AIs and agentic AI as more a commodity than it is a product that you sell, there is no market value in those intrinsically because, as somebody who co-hosts this podcast has already done, you can make your own. And that means that then what are you spending your $1 trillion on? You're spending $1 trillion on a thing that a company can do the same as for 100th, 1000th, is literally zero of the price with the data storage. And then does the market figure that out? Is the market capable of finding that out? And or is there anything for them to find out if the hypothesis is that AI will eventually become a commodity in a way that previous tech revolutions have kind of, in a way that Tim Berners-Lee always imagined, that it will be a free-for-all and there won't be those big corporations taking it over and monopolizing it or turning it into oligopolies or monopolies or somewhere between the two.
I think it's a curious thing where actually Elon Musk is in a better position perhaps than others on this space.
Because he's
Musk,
the richest man in the world.
Well, because he's the richest man in the world, but also because he's the SpaceX IPO is partly about a space company, but really it's about a space company subsidizing a currently loss-making AI model-making firm, and also him starting to realize that and going, okay, well, I'm always going to lose that AI model race, so instead, let's use all this money that I've invested because I'm the richest man in the world and because I have friends who can fund my ability to buy massive amounts of data centers and all the equipment that goes into them and sell it to other companies. And so that is the interesting one. Like, we can have that discussion about the idea of some companies will go by the wayside here because actually everything is just so G'd up that it becomes challenging. For me, what is interesting about this is not all companies, not all of the 3 IPOs will necessarily go bad. And actually, if you ascribe to that view that we are quite frothy, that there is going to be this reckoning in some way, because actually, you can't have those 3 massive players in this space. SpaceX looks like it's in a better position, not least because, by the way, Anthropic is one of its big customers. They bought Colossus One Space here to use because they obviously are struggling for inference, for the ability to actually deliver the needs of their customers.
That one is slightly more complicated because is SpaceX doing that because it's good business, or are they doing that because they built the inventory without having the AI platform to fill that space? So actually, it's the age-old thing of all of those big startups that bought out big, huge offices because they were really excited about the number of staff they were going to recruit. Then suddenly someone came in and went, "Yeah, you can't really afford 1,000 staff members. You can only afford 100, and you break even by hiring out that space to 900 other people." It's a kind of it's the new AI version of that, and I don't know the answer. I don't think anyone really knows the answer. Given that Amazon and given that Google and all the number of different companies are trying to get into that sort of low orbit satellite race, that becomes a really fascinating bit of storytelling. But if SpaceX exists and its revenue model is someone else hiring their machinery before they get their own, and albeit like Apple still makes literal billions from Google being the preferred search provider. There is a lot of chat around the moment about who Siri answers to, and whether or not Apple is finally going to make Siri not shit, or if they're just going to siphon it off the highest bidder, and what that becomes. But if your sole business model is hiring space to people who can do stuff better than you, that's not sustainable unless you're literally Apple.
I know about that. I mean, NCP is a bad example of this, but car park companies made a lot of money and they have a lot of infrastructure. Like, and NCP is bad because it went into administration, but like this is not necessarily a bad thing. To be the, in a gold rush, you want to be the people selling picks, right? This is literally what Elon Musk is doing. To use the horrible trite analogy that everybody always uses for these sorts of things.
I think if you own the infrastructure, great. And if your infrastructure is monopolized in a way that isn't readily copyable. So I think SpaceX has a huge advantage particularly with Trump in office, around owning so much of the pipelines around NASA and all that. People aren't able to move as quickly as him for a variety of reasons, but one is including their closeness to the administration and the closeness to NASA, and some of those contracts are pre-existing. But in the same way that if you own all of the car parks, and all of the land is very expensive, you can't buy new car parks, that no new car parks will pop up. But space is ungovernable, is broadly, regulation is an absolute nonsense that will take countless episodes. I don't understand it. I don't expect anyone else to. So that becomes, if people want to put up satellites, it becomes possible, it becomes meaningful. Then maybe I'm just, Elon Musk has put the work in, is first into market in a meaningful way, and therefore he will win. He's already winning the space race. My question back to you is: has he already won the space race, or is there still a race to be won?
No, he's definitely already won it. I mean, the fact that Blue Origin blew up on the launch pad, I think, is an indication of that. A really interesting example of us going full circle here is that I have vibe coded a little thing using some of my spare tokens that I have, a database of all my sources that I've ever spoken to that I can just search for by keywords. And there are space regulation experts, so I have a nice little list of those that I've just looked at, and we should probably bring someone on for a future episode for exactly that sort of thing.
In one sentence or less before we move on, how the hell do you regulate space? Who does that? Is that NASA? What is the framework for that?
International treaties, my dear friend.
Yeah, are not worth the paper they are written on. Show me one that.
Yeah, so there are issues at the minute, particularly a story that I have tried to pitch just this week was one about there is an increasing concern that China is not following what would be seen as good practice in terms of space. So they are launching a lot of stuff up there. Generally, the US and the West tries to tidy things up. China is launching an awful lot of things in there that are single-use rockets that they then kind of discard lots of stuff around. Again, my ability to talk about anything seemingly off the back of this, having read it, comes through again. But yeah, that's a big concern. And getting China on board with that is going to be hard, not least given the rhetoric that there is currently around the space race.
And with that further proof that Chris is absolutely sure that he does not know everything, we'll come back to try find a question that he actually doesn't know the answer to. We'll be back in 1 second. Welcome back to the final part of Crashed, in which we're going to ask questions that there are no answers to, and I thought I would have to rely on AI, but I've just thought of one, so happy days. I'm on top form. I haven't spent all day talking to strangers. I have the most energy I have ever had in my life. Do you want to go first, or I can hear you typing, so I'm assuming you don't have one. The wonders of AI editing mean you won't be able to hear that really loud typing away as I go with the question. So the Neil Patel presentation that I was talking about earlier, really, really interesting. His point was actually that for the first time this year, bot traffic to websites has overtaken human traffic. So my question is, how far does that go? And what does that mean for the sort of people who are still obsessed with those metrics around people visiting those websites?
Nothing good is along the short of it. It's we're already seeing evidence of The Economist, for instance, setting up specific bot-readable versions of their websites, and kind of opening the door in a certain way to say, hey, look, the human version will have these really nicely written economist style pieces that you know and you recognize that is very idiosyncratically them, that we've been doing for closing in now on 200 years. 1832 was the year in which The Economist was founded, I think. I lose my credibility of being able to say that I write for The Economist occasionally if I got that wrong. And then they also have this one which is bot readable, which is kind of designed for just scraping effectively. And designed, I think, to try and help search engine optimization for generative AI. So GEO. They're also, The Economist, by the way, is a really interesting subject. We should probably get someone on from The Economist AI team, because they have like a whole AI
Not now
data.
you've been cancelled. 1843. Was that what you said?
1843. No, I said 1832.
No,
1843. Yes, sorry.
you're being cancelled.
I am. Yeah, they'll slap me on the wrist. That's really bad. Yeah. 1843. It's been a long day, Alex. My question for you is, what do you think will happen with the Trump administration wanting to have checks and balances on AI models? They're very concerned about this at the minute. They want oversight. Donald Trump has signed an executive order about this. Google, Microsoft, XAI have also signed that agreement, basically saying the US government gets access to this stuff and gets to say yay or nay as to whether or not this is released. So I guess the question is, what would Donald Trump class as unreleasable AI?
Well, that is a question to which there is no answer. There are no boundaries to what is and is not possible in the current US administration, and even more so than the sort of satire around it of US policy is whatever the last person Donald Trump spoke to thinks, is so easily memeable because it turns out to be true. When it comes to that, I think there are so many rollbacks, roll forwards, that depending on Trump's relationship with Elon Musk, specifically Elon Musk, at any given point, is the level of regulation, not regulation, oversight, not oversight, free refugee status and visas for white South African people, or not, depending on which day it is. That is a whole question to which there is no answer. I think in practice, Trump spending time in looking through Russia, spending time in the Middle East, looking through China, and what that policy means around state oversight of private business, again, and depending on which country, what private means, what is having an influence there, how that works in the land of the free is a whole different matter. And I think the executive order can be one thing, but what that means in practice probably just means a very, very expensive gold statue of Donald Trump in the headquarters of Google, in the headquarters of somewhere, and it means less about the oversight. I don't think it will reach meaningful policy or meaningful action before Trump's term ends. I think the vital bit of it is what the next administration takes with it and what level of regulation or oversight or whatever this sort of autocratic version of it is becomes under a different administration. And so much of that depends on who becomes president and a number of different other variables around what happens then. What do you think?
Yeah, I think trying to understand what Donald Trump thinks is impossible. I do think that it's worrying that effectively he has a veto on releasing these sorts of things, just because he is so inscrutable. And the idea that actually he decides what is okay or not is not okay. Having said that, do I think that it's any worse or better than a Sam Altman or a Dario Amodei or a group of those individuals leading tech companies having the same position? No, not really. I think there probably needs to be some sort of like cross-cultural, cross-company, cross-country effort, panel of experts or whatever, nuclear non-proliferation treaty style thing that says, here is what is acceptable, here is what is not acceptable. You submit it to that, and that is the judgment.
Do you think I suppose, is it that oversight that is this more holistic, actually state intervention is a good thing? Or do you think there is some bit of Trump that wants it to rein in some of the anti-Trump rhetoric that if you ask it a certain question, it will say a certain thing about Mr. Trump? Or am I just overthinking it?
No, I think it's partly that, but I think it's more importantly America first. I think that he wants the ability to say, yes, we will have that. Nobody else can have that. And that is the thing. This is another weapon in the trade war that he wants to use. And it's one of the most powerful weapons if AI is going to be quite as consequential as we think it is going to be.
I think we could. Well, we could talk with absolute ignorance for the next hour about like what is Donald doing now, but we should probably leave it. that if that's not already a podcast, it should be. But we will go back and we'll probably just sleep for like 12 hours or something because I'm fucking exhausted after.
I'm going to get some food. I need to know where is good near my hotel in Shoreditch to get food this time.
Bleak is not terrible. That's down the road. There's a really good Thai place. Oh, the really good Vietnamese place up the road. I'll send you the link.
Thank you very much. I'm starving.
But otherwise, we're going to go and see if this podcast will come out tomorrow. Crashed is an Everything Popular is Wrong production. Follow us on all the favorite podcast platforms. Start music from Nuffer. Do all the streamers. Hosted by Acast. System by Riverside Studios. Published every Thursday morning. Email alex@crash.org.uk or chris@crash.org.uk. Chat about anything. We are happy to chat. Even the reply guys, especially the reply guys. Follow us on all the social medias. You can just Google us. We'll be there. Go to crash.substack.com if you want to follow us. Give us some money or whatever. And we'll be back next week.